Passage. Let's look at it. Mark chapter 2 and Mark chapter 3. Last week we talked quite a bit about the Sabbath. We talked about Jesus' tour and how he is approaching and speaking to a different group of people at different points. We're going to kind of focus on the bottom paragraph to this paragraphs. This is chapter 3. So what I'd like you to do is I'm going to give you about 3 or 4 minutes. Let's do this. I'll give you 5 minutes at your table. I want you to choose someone to read the passage at your table to the table. And then, so read it at your table out loud, one of you. And then I want you to come back and let's look at the questions game that we've played in the past. If you're new to our class, what we do this is we just write down questions. Things about the story, things about the circumstance, things about the situation that we wish we understood more or we think are significant. These are questions. Best thing about asking questions is there's no such thing as a bad question. And so ask your questions away. So it's 6:53. I'm going to give you 6 minutes, okay? So I'll watch that clock in the back right there. So choose someone to read it out loud at your table and then come back through it and make your list of questions on your
3, 1 through 5.
Is it chapter 3 you're talking about?
Yes, the bottom section there, it would be chapter 3 at the very bottom. There you go.
6.
I'll read if you want.
All right.
Another time he went into this synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there. Some of them were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched him closely to see if he would heal him on the Sabbath. Jesus said to the man with the shriveled hand, "Stand up in front of everyone." Then Jesus asked them, "Which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to evil, to save life or to kill?" But they remained silent. He looked around at them in anger and deeply distressed at their stubborn hearts, said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand was completely restored. Then the Pharisees went out and began to plot with the Herodians how they might kill Jesus.
Question. So I had one come to mind, and that was, how did the man with the shriveled hand feel being all like in the spotlight? Like, I'm sure we all have things that we're self-conscious about, right? So if that was my thing, I don't think I'd want Jesus to be like, "Hey, stand up and let everyone stare at you."
He was probably fearful because he didn't know the Herodians, what they would do to him. He may not have feared what Jesus was going to do now because he knew he was good.
Right.
But I think there would be a fear there.
I also find it interesting that there's even a man with a shriveled hand at the synagogue because of the way, like, deformities and,
Outcast, that kind of
skin diseases, all of it. Like,
Why was he there?
did they bring him because they were looking at him? They were watching Jesus closely to see if he would do it. Did they plant him?
So the Pharisees, or them, some of them were looking for a reason.
I think so.
Well, they always were.
Yeah.
everything he did.
Yeah. They
I
were
think
trying to
so.
find something to accuse him of.
Because he was there as a trap.
What's also as interesting is, of course, Jesus knew all this. This wasn't something that was
Oh, golly.
new stuff.
And why did Jesus, after, he goes through and he's always, he doesn't do things in public. He tells people not to talk about him healing.
Right.
So why did he say stand up in front of everyone? You just said, he knew it was a trap. So he's like, come on.
Right, but they were in a synagogue. They weren't out. You
Right.
just mentioned the fact that he never did things out in the open public type thing.
Yeah.
Well, they were going to say, yeah.
But of course, his question was: is it on the Sabbath? Is it all right to do good or to do evil, or what? What is allowed?
That seems like
Do good.
that seems unnecessarily binary to me. It's not like the only options are do good or do evil, because then it kind of becomes in this case, okay, it's okay to heal the Sabbath, but do the ends justify the means? Yes, being healed is good, but if we have to do something that's otherwise inappropriate in order to heal, not that Jesus would do anything inappropriate, but it just
The
seems
question was it lawful to do one or the other?
save life or kill.
according to the laws of the Pharisees. And
Right.
Because in theory, the laws that the Pharisees had put together were all about doing good, right? And why didn't they say anything? They didn't respond. They didn't know how to respond.
Right.
you can almost see the man's face who stretched out his hand and it was healed.
Shock.
It'd also be interesting, was that just like an instant, went from shriveled to out, or was it a...
Could you watch it?
Yeah.
You'll have to wait till another time to really ask that question.
Nice thing is we actually get to have answers.
You can add that to your list of questions you want to ask Jesus when you see him.
When I see him.
Because you won't remember any of that.
No, absolutely not.
I think it was almost instant because he said, stretch out your hand. And he said, when he stretched it out, it was.
His hand was completely restored, yeah.
Sort of that like, oh, moment. I didn't even notice it was being healed. Pharisees went out, began to rub their hands.
What were we supposed to do
I also,
other than read it?
What's that?
Ask questions about it.
and what was the connection
All right, give you another minute
between
to wrap up the
Pharisees and the
conversation.
Herodians? So why hadn't they already begun plotting? Like it says they began to plot with the Herodians, right? So,
It's probably more verbiage than anything else because they've been trying to for...
true.
They were against Jesus from the beginning because he stood for good.
It's like using the word they began to plot.
Yeah.
Was that when it just started or had it been going on for...
Well, maybe the Pharisees had just been like, oh, we really want to kill him, but they hadn't like reached out to the other ones yet. Mm-hmm. Gotta take it to the next level.
Right.
Because the Pharisees didn't have the right under Roman law to do, not corporal, a capital punishment, right?
Right. As far as I know.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
Which is why they had to have Pilate do his thing.
All right, let's hear what you got. Let's just do questions. I'll do my best. Just to do questions. All right, what you come up with?
Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. Who is they?
Who was they? Specifically, which they are you talking about here?
Pharisees?
They remained silent.
And they are
Some people. Those people.
Hey,
I gotta
I
stop.
guess that's good too.
I just
That's
can't
exciting.
sit up here. It's wrapped around my still.
I would say that was good too. Also,
All right, what other
in paragraph
questions
2,
you got?
them.
Some of them.
And there's lots of theys and thens.
Say that again?
Why did Jesus want him to get up and stand up in front of everybody?
Yeah, this seems a little odd. Jesus's actions. He sort of makes a spectacle of God, doesn't he?
Yeah.
I'm gonna move down to the so I don't have to yell. Is that all right with you?
Yep.
We'll sit.
Closer to you. I am. Well, I'm ugly, Donna, and I'm trying not to make you lose your lunch. So, all right. What other questions? That spectacle piece has actually bothered a lot of folks through the years. The people who are willing to approach Scripture with a little more skepticism and edge than most of you who come to Sunday school on Saturday night. They actually have a real problem with Jesus doing this. They raise that.
Tangentially to that, I was asking, how did that man feel? I mean, I know if I'm probably self-conscious about whatever, I certainly don't want everyone like staring at me for that reason.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions of this guy. This guy, he fascinates me. He appears in the other Gospels as well. There's a lot happening. If you're the guy Jesus says stand up, is that a good thing or bad thing? An undetermined thing.
Depends on your personality.
Because we got stories where Jesus calling some folks out. We got Jesus doing some amazing things. Man with the withered hand. We don't really know entirely what that means other than he doesn't have use of a hand, which puts him in a category of disabled, judged. It'd be really hard for us to say what his life was like since we weren't there, but we can imagine. And then he's asked to stand up in front of everybody. What other questions did you see?
Did
Yeah.
he,
Go ahead.
did the man go there expecting to be healed?
Is this one of the sick people or the injured people who are flocking to Jesus? If you hear Jesus is in town and you need something, it's worth showing up. What else?
Did they let people that were disabled go into the synagogue, or did they try to keep them out?
Yeah, there's some questions about synagogue practice, and this was the man supposed to even be there at all, and how would the others have viewed him? These are good questions. What else? Yeah.
It's interesting that Jesus would have asked the Pharisees at that time about to save a life or to kill, and they went out to plot to kill him.
Yes, Al, you caught the play on words that Mark is doing here. Mark is setting them up because when you ask a rhetorical question as a leader, especially one that is to set someone up for failure, we expect them to say, no, it's not lawful, right? And then what do they go? Then they themselves go out to start the plot to do the very thing they said they shouldn't do. I mean, you caught the. I'm not. My English grammar language is not good anymore, but we call this in Greek ironic parallelism, where the story says something that it's coming. There's humor, and it's not funny in the sense that ha humor, but it's this sort of gotcha kind of thing in Mark's storytelling. What else? There's a couple really interesting things here.
One of the things that he brought up was why Jesus asked what is lawful instead of what's unlawful.
Yep. So Jesus' question to them is interesting. In verse number 2, Mark gives us sort of the temperature and the attitude of the people who are there. What is their attitude? They are looking for something to get Jesus, right? So let's hit pause there for a second. If anybody ever felt like at your job or with your parents or with anyone that they were trying to catch you in doing something wrong, everybody ever felt like that way? When they are doing that, when they are auditing you or trying to catch you do something wrong, what do?
Be on your best behavior.
You get on your best behavior. You try to do what's right. If they're looking for wrong, you do as right as you can.
Mm-hmm.
What does Jesus do?
Not.
Jesus takes his thumb, licks it, and does what? Sticks it in their eye. I mean, I know you're laughing, and I've said this a couple weeks. This cracks me up about Jesus. He's like, some people are out hunting for us. Let's go to the set. Let's go. Come on. Jesus he's baiting them. And we see Jesus' emotion here, don't we? So we got a little bit of I'll call it the punk emotion. Jesus kind of being a little bit of a punk. But we all have other emotions. And what is that Jesus has?
Passion.
Anger and what?
Distress.
Stressed.
But he also had passion for the
I think it's important for us to step back here for a moment and ask you. I know your answer is going to be yes, or you know your answer to my question is going to be no. But that's a quick, easy answer. But does it bother you that Jesus is angry?
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. There are definitely people who are frustrated with an angry Jesus.
Well, he was angry when he cleared the temple.
I understand that, but
That bothers me too.
that bothers people too. Because here's the thing, Donna. You don't want an angry Jesus. Because there's a bunch of junk you people have done that would tick Jesus off.
Amen.
And you say amen, but aren't you glad you got the peaceful Jesus? The one with the lamb and his hand stroking, blue sash. hair billowing in the wind kind of thing, right? Right? That's the Jesus you want. You don't want the Jesus who's distressed by your stubbornness.
No, that makes him more human.
I understand that. I agree with you, more human. But we recast Jesus in the emotion we need in the moment. So I'm going to play politics for right now since we're not allowed to do it. Whatever your personal political persuasion, when Jesus or when someone else does the opposite, it's okay to be angry. It's righteous indignation. Right? When it's you who's doing stuff, what you're wanting is
Mercy.
peaceful, merciful reconciliation. That's the point. I'm also have a twinge of disappointment in Jesus that he is, in these words, deeply distressed. I don't have a problem as much with Jesus being angry as his actions sort of here seem to be goading. I don't know if that's the right word, but is there a better word than goading? What's it? That feels like I'm speaking good on
Antagonistic.
Antagonistically, yes. Goading sounds like Uncle King James, and so I don't know. I don't think it works necessarily, but an antagonistic Jesus, while I love it on one hand, it's kind of jarring just a bit. There's some other really interesting, good questions in here.
Was the man with the shriveled hand one of them in verse 2?
He's nailed it. So we just make the dude with the shriveled hand the good guy. After all, what happened to him?
He got healed.
Get healed, but we don't know anything about his attitude. We don't know anything about his reasons for being there. And they say, well, he's hurt. We have other examples in the New Testament of where people who were sick or injured were used to set up the Jesus and his disciples. Here's a question that really has bothered me through this. Jesus basically says, which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill, but they remained silent. These are the people who won't shut up. The Pharisees don't shut up. I was reading when I was up here on the stage because I copied an image on my phone so I could read it to you of these lists of Sabbath keeping rules. And I don't have enough screenshots to go through the list of all the stuff that they'd come up with on what constituted work. You could do a mouthful of wine, but 2 mouthfuls of water. One drinking water was not as much work as wine. But like what I'm saying, you're all making these grimaces because these people love to come up with stuff. And so when Jesus gives them a chance to say something, what do?
Yeah.
They also didn't want to be seen as being wrong.
They didn't want to be wrong in front of the people. Because the other thing we've learned at this point with Jesus is when he asks you a question, he's about to lower the bone. Typically.
So do you think they brought the man with the shriveled hand?
Say that again?
Do you think they brought the man with
I
the
think it's
shriveled
highly
hand?
likely he's there on purpose.
Huh?
I think
You
he's
think?
I would
A
say
plant.
a plant. I have no proof. I can only guess, but I have Randy Jumpers 2,000 years later is no doubt that the man is manipulated.
Yeah.
Whether he was planted on purpose or whether he was there and he is just a casualty of their approach.
Because they watched.
They are watching. Here's a different question. They watched him closely to see if he would do what?
Kill him.
So here's a question. Was it a sin to heal someone on the Sabbath? No. Well, I mean, I don't know. That's what I'm saying. It's the question point. And so it's worth a study. So how would they determine that this was a sin, because we just sort of move forward and we say, well, of course they think this. And then the question becomes, which is we're finding a pattern in all these stories, who chose that it was a sin to heal on the Sabbath?
Sure they did.
They did.
Yeah.
Because Scripture is completely silent on it. There's no, thou shalt not heal on the Sabbath.
The question was asked, is it legal?
Yeah.
Not is it illegal?
Right. And I don't want to, let me back up. I don't want to parse way much in that, because we're using some English idioms here at this point that wouldn't be found in the Greek. I want to be careful. I want to say that nuance, because you might find the other version of that question in other English translations. This is New Living. What I'm getting at here, the piece is, this is one more example of the Pharisees applying their standards to the process. Because they're saying, what does Jesus do everywhere he goes? He does what to people?
Heals them.
He heals them. And so his healing is his what?
Job.
His job and his work. And so it's his work. So if he's healing, then he's working. Okay, this is a piece don't miss, because I think this is what Jesus is attacking from the get-go. Like, this is the whole point of it. If I am upset with Gene because he heals someone and makes their life better and improves their situation, but he does it on the Sabbath, and I have obsessed about Gene and what he's done, what have I missed? The amazing thing that just happened to this man. I have become so obsessed with my rightness that I have missed righteousness. I've become so obsessed with my thing that I've missed the beautiful things that Jesus is doing. And so this is where he goes, some of them were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched him closely to see if he would heal on the Sabbath. Jesus said to the man with the shriveled hand, stand up in front of everyone. Then Jesus asked him, which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil? Well, that's a no-brainer. Okay? Like, that's like saying, what is better, breathing or not breathing? I mean, really it is.
Yeah.
Think about it. What's more lawful, to do good or to do evil? And the answer is, do good. This is not a trick question. And yet they did what? They remained silent. See, this is the piece here. This tells you, if they're there not to learn, what are they there to do? To attack and accuse. They are not interested in the message of Jesus. And there is a side point for us. And look, this is a trap that sometimes we, specifically in the evangelical Western world, where answers and logic and truth is supposed to move everything forward. Know this. The people who are against faith, the people who are against your spirituality, your co-workers, your family members who are against your practice of religious and your following of Jesus, are not interested in logic, they're not interested in truth, and they don't want answers. And all the stuff you build is not going to convince them.
It's fear. They have fear.
They have fear. They have rejection. And so there's a famous book by Lee Strobel, and it's a great book, but it's a great one for me to use as a bad example. And it's Evidence That Demands a Verdict. And like, if you just get enough evidence, then they're going to find Jesus not guilty. Well, I've got the O.J. Simpson trial. I've got all kinds of trials, no offense to the attorney in the room, that it does not matter the situation. I got shootings all over this country for the last few years. That the truth is not going to move the needle. Right? Mm-hmm. We can have videos of the person doing it, and someone will find a way to make the video not true.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
So, why do you think it isn't going to happen? It's the same thing isn't going to happen when it comes to your spirituality and your following Jesus. Your spouse, your child, your neighbor, your cousin, your parent is not going to be convinced by the answer when they're trying to catch you doing wrong. Because they're not looking for answers, they're looking for ways to stop you. And so in some ways, you should breathe a sigh of relief, because you're not going to be able to argue them into your own experience. It's just not going to happen. And you can actually perform a miracle in front of them. And you know what they're going to do? They're going to head out and plan to kill you.
Yeah, because the Holy Spirit's the only one that can change their heart.
It is ultimately a marrying of the Holy Spirit and their will to couple together to make this decision. It is not riding on you. Let me say it this way. It is not on your intellect or your answers or even the miracles God does in your life that will change them. It's the Spirit of God and their will and desire. Now, does that mean you just sit back and do whatever you want? No, you got to live right and righteous. You got to celebrate the miracles, but you're not going to get the credit. They're not going to take what happens in your life and say, bam, here I am. The other thing that's interesting is this next question, which is lawful to the Sabbath, to save life or to kill? It's interesting because there actually is a Jewish principle. It's called Pekod Nefesh. It's a Hebrew word which basically says all things are lawful to save a life. So think in terms of this. I mean, this is just basic common sense. They're not, even Pharisees were foolish. If someone falls over on the side of the road and is about to die, you don't look at them and say, stinks for you, it's the Sabbath. Right? I mean, anybody been in New York City? The largest hospital system in all of New York City is what? It's Jewish. Beth Israel, in the hospital, the doctors and nurses who are Jewish, they still go to work on the Sabbath. Because what are they doing? They're saving lives. Mm-hmm. And so, is it lawful to kill on the Sabbath? This is another difficult thing. Because you know this, if you're going to be an Israelite throughout history, what's going to happen to you? Somebody's going to try to kill you. If there's a fairly good sense in your lifetime, I think I saw the study. I think since this is an overstatement, I'm pulling from maybe not a reputable source, but back from the far recesses of my mind. Since like 586 BC, there's never been more than 40 years where this Israelite nation hasn't been under attack from some entity or something somewhere. I mean, if you start thinking through it, captivity, you just go through the years. So guess if you're Jewish, you're going to end up in a battle. And when the enemy is coming, you can't yell, sorry, it's the Sabbath. Right?
No.
Put down your sword. So there were even things there that allowed you to kill on the Sabbath. So the answer to these questions is it acceptable to save or to kill? And the answer was yeah. Even by the Pharisees' own rules. He looked around at them in anger and deeply distressed at their stubborn hearts and said to the man, stretch out your hand. He stretched it and his hand was completely restored. And I want to look at this next sentence because this is one of those ones that flies past you and you shouldn't feel bad or difficult because the biggest question to me in this whole thing, like all those other questions were good, but now I'm going to put my academic brain, Randy Jumper, nerd hat on for a second and say, this is the most significant question for me. It's this. Why in the world would a Pharisee and a Herodian sit down and talk together? So let me explain to you what a Herodian is, because for the most part, only one of you has had my graduate level course to discuss Herodians, and hopefully she remembers. She's already taken the quiz, so she can forget it now. When you see the word Herodians, one other word jumps out at you, and what's the word?
Herod.
Herod. So these are people who've associated with Herod. Okay? This is not the same Herod at this point in history that was alive at the birth of Jesus, but this is the family of the Herod who was around at the birth of Jesus. What do we know about this Herod?
He was evil.
He was not just, he was evil. What are some of the things he did?
He
Kill babies.
He killed babies. Anybody else remember the other things that he did?
He cut off John the Baptist's head.
This would be his son who cuts off John the Baptist's head
And puts it on a platter.
and puts it on a platter. Why does he put it on the platter?
Because that's what his
Gives
daughter,
it to the daughter of the girl. Why does he
wanted-
give it to the daughter?
because she danced really good.
Because she could dance really good, and her dancing really good made him want to do what?
Mm.
You all are skirting the answer. We live in the 21st century. What did the man want to do?
Have sex?
He wanted to sleep with this child. He was his sexuality, the Herodians, was wanton lustfully. Herod the Great, who is this Herod's dad, who's the one who killed the babies. Again, I wasn't there, but most historians and scholars will tell you he died of advanced venereal disease. The stories of his raucous orgies are disgusting. And he is Jewish. But guess where he learns all these things from?
The Romans.
Rome, and more, actually just a little bit closer, more Greek than Rome. Herodians embrace Greek and Roman culture. The Herodians are a group of Jews. These are the people, I think I told you before, who were so embarrassed that they were circumcised that they had prosthetics added to their bodies so that when they participated in these horrific, all-nude groups, no one would think anything of them. That they didn't keep the law. The Herodians are. So let me say it. Let me do it this way. Anybody ever seen Jesus Christ Superstar musical? Remember the Herod in it? How was Herod portrayed in that one? Anyone remember?
I didn't remember.
The Herod in Jesus Christ Superstar is incredibly effeminate homosexual. Like that's how he's presented in Superstar, and it's a very accurate portrayal of our historical record. Herodians weren't just Herod, but these were people who decided to associate and to abandon. There are stories, whether they're true or not, but from the time period where Herodians would try to break every law to prove that they were Jewish by birth, but not Jewish by covenant. So read the sentence again. The Pharisees went and got with the who? Herodians. So that they could do what? So if you had to put two people in a room who were vastly different, what were the marks of a Pharisee? Law keepers? Religiously, not just a law keeper. What did they do? Made rules to keep them from breaking the law. So if this line that's down the middle is the line, they got rules that are keeping them from that line. Like there are barriers from the line. If you're a Herodian, you were over here jumping up and down on the line, right? You are known by how you broke the line. So here's the question. Why would a Pharisee and a Herodian spend time together?
To kill Jesus.
Just to kill Jesus.
Yeah.
Surely one of them could come up with something.
Well, I say so, the stink of killing Jesus would be on the Herodians and not the Pharisees.
There's some piece on this. The Pharisees are passing the buck. But I think we can't miss the greater issue here. It's this. Pharisees were not avoiding the law because they wanted to be righteous. And I think Mark is sending a message. The Herodians were the disgusting people of the first century Israel. But guess who also were the disgusting first century people? Because they both had the same ending agenda. So let me make an application point here very carefully. And I, fear and trembling, wrote this several different ways this week because there is no way in our current political charged world that you won't interpret it politically, and I don't mean it this way. But we have to, as people of faith, be very careful who we align ourselves with. And common goal does not mean we should sit at the table together. Because I would argue all of us would be Pharisees. This point in history, I would hope all of us were. People who were doing the best we could to follow the law. And if we're not careful, even in our best attempts to do right, we cannot forget the importance of keeping righteousness first and foremost. Pharisees were so angry. They started out looking for an answer to kill Jesus that they found whoever they could partner with. So think about it for a second. There's this debate, who killed Jesus? It appears every now and then. Some people are concerned if you say the Jews killed Jesus, then you're an anti-Semite. If you say the Romans killed Jesus, then you're ignoring the reality. If it was, and then people like me will say, well, everybody's responsible for the death of Jesus. And there's some sense of that, except none of us were actually there. So it's kind of hard to blame you because you weren't actually there that day. But what you find is an elaborate structure of interlaced, everybody was working together to kill Jesus.
People that hated each other hated Jesus more.
Correct.
They wanted all the fuel they could put.
I heard someone say it this way: Jesus has an uncanny ability to bring people together. Both for good
And for evil.
and for evil. Because Jesus divides. He walks into a room and he divides. And he demands the division. You either with him
You have to choose.
or you're not. And when you're in the not category, you stand around and look and you suddenly find alignment with people you never would have aligned with before. I'm fascinated by this moment in Jesus' life. We talked about this, I think, last week. I'm not really convinced that this story happens sequentially. I really think this story specifically happens later in Jesus' ministry. I've got biblical evidence. It happens later in Matthew, for example. This is a cherry-picked story group together. Man-made rules. And let's say it differently, because we don't make rules here. Man-made practices to connect with God are very alluring. And they're very comfortable. The ways we connect with God that we create are incredibly comfortable. We wear them like the clothes we've always worn, because the clothes we've always worn are always more comfortable than the clothes that are new. And we would never call them traditions, because they're not traditions, they're just the ways we connect with God. But what they really, really are is old traditional clothing. And if we're so in love with our clothing or our ways that we miss what the Spirit of God is doing, then we will do whatever it takes to keep our ways as opposed to following the way. And we will align ourselves with factions, groups, and individuals who will give us what we want as opposed to being where the Spirit is leading us. I got tons of illustrations, and we don't have a whole lot of time. But my favorite one is this, and I'll go. I think I may have shared it here before. My grandfather, Symbols of God Ministry, went to Bible school in 1947 in Hot Springs, Arkansas. There was a raging controversy in our churches at the time because a group of churches and individuals in this region, Russellville, specifically down to Hot Springs, had decided that jewelry on a minister was something used to draw attention to themselves. It was flashy. So if I wore a wedding band, I was taking the picture off of Jesus and on myself. Okay? You know what? That motive's kind of pure. Put it in a vacuum. the big controversy, they solved the wedding rings in Bible college. They talked through it. They felt like wedding rings were good because if you didn't wear the wedding ring, then someone could think you weren't married. That was dangerous, especially for a bunch of Pentecostal preachers. Just to be honest. So the issue became tie tacks. You guys remember those? Pins that were here. There were some that had chains that were attached to them with a clip, and then some were just a tack. And Papaw describes the three factions that were formed. There were the no tie tack faction of the Assemblies of God, which meant if you wore tie tack, then you were drawing attention to yourself. Then there was the big gold band chain people. These were the liberals that basically said, if you're going to say I can't wear a tie tack, I'm going to put the biggest, fattest one. I would guess which faction I probably would have been. But and then there was the middle of the road. Like you could wear a simple tie tack that may have just been one color, but didn't have any sort of jewels, or it was the early Pentecostal days. We were cubic zirconian at that point. It was Arkansas courts. People left Bible school. People took churches out of the Assemblies of God over this. Motives, I actually think were pure. Not on me, on him. But our ways got in the way of the way. And here's the thing I'm asking myself. So it's good to pop on Papaw 1940s. We're in 2020. I'm asking myself a lot right now. What are the ways that I am currently participating and connecting with Christ that are my ways and aren't his way? And if I'm so beholden on holding on to it, is it possible that I'm eliminating other people's connection with Christ because I want them to do it my way? You say, well, what's your answer? That's a problem I don't know yet. Because I like the stuff that I do. I'm pretty good in my own eyes. And on that heavy note, have a great week.